Right, 7 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. The January 19th meeting of the Rockport School Committee is now in session. This meeting will be recorded and broadcast live, so we can look at it future playback if you just can't get enough of the content of this meeting. First item up on the agenda is the approval of minutes from January 12th. I assume everybody's had a chance to review them. Is there anything that you'd like to amend those minutes with? No? So do we have a motion to approve the meetings of January 12th, meeting minutes of January 12th? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. I'm going to move public comment to later in the agenda because this is our third meeting about the school budget, and this is the biggie. We've changed the format of how we compile and present to the public and to the various boards that we interact with in the town. So we're actually going to be going through that page by page. And the hope is that tonight, after we review the material, we'll have room for public comments. The school committee will debate and hopefully vote to, in some manner, approve the content of that material if it satisfies all of their criteria. And then tomorrow at 9 a.m., there'll be both digital and print versions that will be distributed throughout the town. So on our website, we'll have a hot link where you can get the entire book because it's part of the public record and download it. But you can also find hard print copies of it at the superintendent's office, here in the Peggy Brenner Library, and then at Town Hall. And then Mitch will be distributing copies to both the Board of Selectmen and FinCom, who are partners in shepherding this through the budget process. So we're really excited about this document because although we have had for the past 10 years materials that demonstrated full transparency in terms of where every penny was spent in the budget, what we didn't necessarily have was a one-stop shop to see how the monies come in, how the monies go out, and what the value of the school is in addition to the expense. So we've worked pretty hard to create a document that I think is easily accessible by the public, but has the appropriate level of detail for those who perform oversight and review of the school's budget materials. So we're pretty excited about it. And this is the first time that the school committee as a group is going to see it. So readily available tomorrow at 9 a.m. So next item, Mark, is a piece of correspondence that deals with an inflation cap letter that both the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents and Mass Association of School Committees have combined to request to the legislators. Maybe that's something you could.
Yep. So in your drive, you have a letter that was sent to then Governor-elect Healy, now Governor Healy, co-authored by MASS, MASC, the MTA, and the AFT. And the intent is just to urge them to implement Chapter 70 formula in a manner that reflects actual cost of inflation as measured by the inflation factors. That was not done by the previous administration, which has now put all the communities in the Commonwealth behind the eight ball, so to speak, and may put us on a path where we will be unable to meet the spending targets according to the Student Opportunity Act. So we've talked a lot about advocacy in these meetings, and I want the community to know that's an important factor of what many of us do are in our roles as school committee and as leadership of the district. So I think this was a really powerful and important one, just to let you know that our organizations are taking steps to the best of their abilities to let the legislator know and the governor know that we would like some change to happen. This does not address the 14% special education increase that we will talk more about tonight and that we have talked about at our previous two meetings. There is lots of advocacy work happening behind the scenes right now with these organizations and others who are going to be taking similar action and going actually well beyond just letter writing to try to address that 14%. So I will give you updates on that advocacy work as well in the future. But if you have any questions about this later, feel free to reach out to me.
Right, and just to add to that, I know we're we're asked occasionally by the same individual, but I'm sure his opinion stands for many, and often on the floor of town meeting, why we're not floating a motion before the town to make such a request. And our response has been, it's much more powerful to have the support of the members of the 351 cities and towns of Massachusetts that belong to both the school committee group and the school superintendent group. So we haven't forgotten about that request, but we think it's much more powerful and it leverages it to a much greater degree to have those people in with us. Sure. Well, I've freshened up my microphone now. Yeah. Oh, good. And then, as Mark mentioned, there's a budget gap that's going to be a big part of the discussion tonight in our proposed budget.
There it is.
And a big driver of that was an increase that the state legislature approved, and that will be the subject of a separate effort by those two groups. So in anticipating that question coming up at Springtown meeting, it will be much the same response that we do feel that our state legislators who are devoted to our district actually have been fairly helpful to us over the years. So it's much more powerful, I think, to send that message with a larger group. All right, so the next item up for bids is personnel. There are no motions at this time or no actions at this time. Share the success, Josh. I think you've got the week off this week, so we can dive into the budget. But thank you for showing. That's really very supportive, and hopefully we will reward that with an interesting presentation for you. Subcommittee updates, I don't believe there are any, so we will move to the FY24 budget development and budget book presentation.
So what we're going to do tonight is we will step through the budget book. I know you have it in front of you. You've had time to see pieces of it in the past couple presentations. So it's on the screen for the community, and as Chairman Kelly said, there will be hard copies distributed throughout the community as early as probably noon tomorrow, depending how quickly we hustle and get the new books printed. And then there will be a link right on the front of the school district website as well for anybody in the community, so they can click right on it. They can get full access to this full budget book. So tonight, what I'd like to do is just literally go page by page through it for the community and for the members. There are areas where we'll go pretty quickly, where we won't read the entire thing out loud, and we'll just kind of go through it and give quick overviews. And then there'll be other moments in the presentation where we'll stop and really have some serious conversations about what's on the page and what the drivers are around the budget. You will notice that we wanted to go out of our way to make sure that our students are represented throughout this document. So you're going to see some beautiful artwork from kids K to 12 in here. You're going to see some great pictures of kids in classrooms and on the field and on the stage. Chairman Kelly says it a lot. These are our constituents. These are our non-voting constituents that we represent. And so we just kind of want to put a face behind the numbers. When we talk about numbers, it becomes personal sometimes when you talk about staffing and programming, but at the end of the day, it's about the children that we serve in the community. So just as you look through it, please take note of some of the graphics that go along with it. You'll see a letter in here from Chairman Kelly and myself to the community that just sort of introduces the budget book, the process we've gone through, some of the positives, some of the struggles. Again, thanking the community. We really do believe that we benefit greatly from a community that supports public education and that has lots and lots and lots of philanthropic engagement. And so we thank all of those organizations wholeheartedly for supporting us, the PTO, EFR, FRA, Rotary, countless other organizations that have supported us along the way, every year in and year out. A nice little infographic for the community, just to take a quick look, kind of Rockport Public Schools at a glance in here, so you can kind of see some quick overviews of things that we're proud of, graduation rates, courses that we offer, athletics, fine arts. Principal Rose has talked a little bit in this forum, and I'm sure she'll come back and talk to us a little more as the updated course of studies comes out, but really, really proud of re-engaging and maybe bolstering our dual enrollment program would be the way to put it. So with Salem State and with North Shore Community College to really work towards getting our high school students the possibility of pre-college and college credit earned while they're here at Rockport High School. So it's just some quick highlights and some unbelievable travel opportunities that our students go through to really, as we like to say, get off the island and learn about the world outside, up over the bridge, so to speak. So some nice work behind here, just a quick visual for all of us. The next section will take us through this executive summary. We've talked a lot in the previous meetings who the budget represents, how we've built up the budget. massive thanks to the leadership team. This has been a collaborative effort for 8 to 10 weeks. Lots of hours, lots of heavy discussion, lots of philosophy and practical work behind the scenes to get us to this document tonight and to get us to a budget that we feel represents the needs of our students. And so we did really start with a district-wide zero-based budget and really built it from the ground up based on the needs. And we didn't simply roll things over with programming and numbers, and so we're really proud of that work. The next page, if anybody really is interested in studying school budgeting, there's a nice overview of the components of the operating budget, the town contributions, the school reserves, user fees, grants, and then a section here that just sort of explains to the general public all the other related factors and funding areas that come into play. Chapter 70, the capital improvements, the special ed reserve, Medicaid, and donations. So that, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces that make up this pie of our budget. So I just think if you're so inclined to do a little studying, this is a nice information for people in the community to understand how we do business. I'd really be remiss if I didn't thank Monty Hitchler and the technology department in the town of Rockport. It's a unique partnership that we have. We do not have our own technology department in the school district, and so because of that, we really do fall under the umbrella of the town technology team. It's a small team, but they work really hard, and I've never been in a place, I'm almost in my 30th year in a 6-school district, and I don't think I've ever been in a place where I've seen people just jump to say yes. Anytime we have an ask for students or teachers from the technological standpoint, it's always met. And so, you know, I never even seem to question whether or not we're going to be able to get what we need. So thank you to Monty, thank you to town administrator for supporting that model. It's much appreciated. And there's just a short list of some of the endless ways that the department has served us well over time on behalf of students. Next couple pages will give you a quick kind of higher end overview, just a 3-year look at our expenditure and our revenue section so that you can just see a little bit of a historical snapshot on where we've been. It's not a deep dive. The deep dive for the FY24 clearly comes at the end of the book with all the spreadsheets. But some people just want to see that kind of overview at a glance feel. So this provides the community different versions of the budget. So you'll see some narrative, you'll see some 10,000-foot view, and then when you get to the back of the book, you'll see the real deep dive with the spreadsheets. So it'll sort of meet everybody's needs, I think, from a clarity standpoint. We did go over this section coming up in our last meeting, but for people who did not attend the meeting or see it, I think it's worth stepping through, if you're okay with that, Mr. Chair, stepping through a little bit again. We've talked about being fiscally conservative and fiscally responsible a lot this year already. At the same time, we talk about moving the district forward and trying to make the school district stronger and better for our kids every year. That's a difficult charge. And if you live in non-education walks of life, I think it's a charge that a lot of people wouldn't even discuss. You know, cutting and cutting and cutting, yet improving and improving and improving. So we make no apologies for needing to do that. It's taxpayer funded. We're respectful of that every year. And so what I wanted to do here, and the team and I wanted to talk about the importance of showing the community some programmatic and staffing priorities that this budget does support. And so I'll step through a couple of these just so you can see that there's some thought behind a lot of this work tonight. I'm really, really proud Principal Rose and I have been working with an organization called Project Lead the Way. They're affiliated with WPI and then nationally affiliated all across the country. Really proud to say that this budget supports the implementation of 4 courses next year at the high school: Introduction to Engineering Design, Computer Science Principles, Environmental Sustainability, and Human Body Systems. Ultimately, we want to do this as a 2-year implementation and get to a 6-course pathway for our students who have those leans that will include some kind of capstone or internship opportunities at the end. Really, really proud of that work. This is budget neutral in this vein, and when I say budget neutral, I mean that the current budget as it's constituted and then as we develop the FY24 budget supports it without any increase or without any reductions in other areas, if that makes it clear. And you can see the funding sources. It'll come out of the curriculum budget, some partnerships with the technology department, and then the representatives from Project Lead the Way and Ms. Rose and I are negotiating to see if we can find some grant funding available. Really, really proud of this initiative. It's a major gap in programming, and I just find ourselves in a position where we need to leverage this right now. We can't wait for another group of students to come to the high school and not have an opportunity to take these courses. Would you like me to go through each before anybody on the committee has comments? Or
So we
however you
did
want to do it?
review these last
Right.
week. If anyone feels like they'd like to go through those.
Okay.
You
I
feeling?
feel like it was pretty thorough last
Okay.
week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have the opportunity to increase our chorus position to a full-time position due to a retirement, and so it's a change in salary. So that is a positive win, and it provides middle school and high school students with a more balanced menu of performance classes moving forward. So we'll have one full-time teacher in each of those domains: orchestra, chorus, and band, which is a nice adjustment. We've talked a lot in all school districts, as well as here, about the needs to meet the social emotional needs of students, what going in and out of COVID has done to our students to some extent, and the need for professional staff to support that. So we currently have a .8 adjustment counselor funded through ESSER. We knew as a district that position would be probably necessary to keep, but unsupported after ESSER 3 falls away this year. So we are reallocating a 1.0 FTE, which is right now in the 4th grade teaching position. And by reallocating that, we'll be able to fund this position. That does put us in move us from 3 teachers to 2 in the 4th grade. But because we have smaller enrollments in the previous grade, you'll see in the document that our class size remains 18. So we've leveraged the changes and shifts in class size, and we're leveraging our FTEs and staffing to try to make this need. So we believe it's necessary. We believe it has a positive impact on the social emotional needs of our students at the elementary school, and will not have any negative impact at the academic level based on this class size. We're also looking at a .6 elementary speech and language pathologist. The district currently employs a full-time speech and language pathology assistant, SLPA, and we do that through contracted services. By reallocating that position, the district is able to hire a .6 speech and language pathologist, offers us higher clinical expertise and more abilities to meet the needs of our students. Another big programmatic shift and need, the district has really identified a need to have a district-wide behavioral intervention program. We're seeing more dysregulation and behaviors among students that are really impacting their ability to stay engaged academically and socially in the classroom at a lot of grade levels. We're going to primarily focus on the elementary and the middle school. It doesn't mean the high school won't benefit, but out of the gate, we're going to probably focus primarily on elementary and middle school. And so we're going to reallocate one full-time middle school counseling position, and then the district will seek to hire a board-certified behavior analyst, or a BCBA, who will oversee this program, help us build it, and partner with the special ed department to make sure we have a program at the elementary school and at the middle school that is catered to meet the needs of these students. We believe this shift continues to help us meet the social emotional needs of students. We understand the importance of the counseling position, which is why we looked at that adjustment counselor position at the elementary school so heavily, but we really feel like there are times when the behavioral needs of students are trying to be supported by professionals in different roles, as opposed to someone who's dedicated and trained appropriately in this role. So we don't take any of these reallocations lightly, but we do believe that they're in the best interest of students at this period of time. On the next page, you'll see a couple other positions, reclassifications of the dean positions at the middle school and the high school, and to go back to an assistant principal model, middle school assistant principal, high school assistant principal, to really support the initiatives in the district around teaching and learning, around curriculum implementation, around professional development, and most importantly, around observation and supervision and evaluation. We really have spent a lot of time as a leadership team honing our skills. Just this morning, we had a session on constructive feedback, and we did a workshop on how to give meaningful feedback to teachers in the classroom in almost real time, shortly after an observation, and with a thought partner, so to speak, by their side. The principal and the assistant principal really can become a powerful team to lead that work. And right now, with the dean model, we don't have that capability. So this allows us to move this district forward, focusing on teaching and learning, instructional practices, and really try to give the faculty the support they need to be better tomorrow than they are today. A couple of the changes you'll see here that we talked about last week, the executive assistant to the director of student services, and a central office administrative assistant, reclassifying a couple positions at central office so that we have confidential personnel in central office at all times is an important component here, and ultimately reclassifying a clerk position at the elementary school. As we discussed last week, the elementary school is unique. It's very busy in the morning, it's very busy in the afternoon. It doesn't mean the middle of the day isn't, but there's some strategic times where the needs of students and the needs of families have to be met quickly and well, and we need the personnel appropriately deployed in the mornings and the afternoons specifically, and then throughout the middle of the day, we'll be able to leverage this position a little bit and support that school. So proud of the work the leadership team has done around here. We are going to have a harder conversation in a few minutes, so I just want people viewing in the room and at home to understand that while we will have some difficult conversations around the budget, there has been a lot of work around bettering the district and moving things forward, and so that's kind of where we paused last week in our last meeting. And so for people who weren't involved in that, that's a quick overview.
So Mark, can I just jump in and add, we often get the question after we go through the budgetary process, so what am I getting for my money? What am I getting for my override dollar? If you look at pages 9 and 10, you'll see that with each programming and staff addition or change, there's a paragraph at the bottom of each one that says, what is the student benefit? Because the focus is on the student in the classroom and how they're supported, and that's really the driving mission of the school committee. And I think I often have conversations with people who are outside of K-12 education, who may not have access anymore to a student in their life who is going through it. And what I often say to them, use that one?
Oh, if you're not talking.
Mute your mic.
There you go.
Okay. So I often have conversations with people who don't have kids in the system or who don't work in K-12 education, and they're confused at times as to why things have to change, because of course their perception, like many of us, of what it's like to be in a K-12 situation is 20, 30, 40, in some cases 50 years out of date. So I often point out to them, if you think about what your life was like in 1960, 70, 80, 90, it's probably significantly different than it is today. And that's very true for the kids in our world as well. They've been buffeted by a lot of factors. So some of the positions you see here related to their social and emotional development, you may not have had those when you went to school many years ago. That's not to say that the need wasn't there, but it's so prominent today that it actually gets in the way of having those children access the curriculum, or for the kids who are being supported by the teachers in the classroom being able to service their needs at an equal level. So there is a tremendous amount of thought in terms of each addition or tweak that the superintendent and his administrative senior team is making to try and address those needs, while still being very conscious of the money that's being entrusted to us by the taxpayers. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because I think it's hard. We want to do a little bragging here about what the administrative team and superintendent have done. It's a group effort. It's a hard one. And the table stakes are pretty high, because kids, really, if you don't catch them early and support them early, it just becomes a much harder journey throughout life.
Mr. Chairman, are we holding comment? Are we holding comment, or are we interrupting with comment? How do you want to deal?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I just had, it's a comment, it's not a question. I know that the leadership team has worked very hard on the behavioral intervention program. And we've heard a little bit about it. Would love to have a presentation about it, to see what the hopes and the dreams are of it, so that we can talk about next year how the implementation and everything is going too. It's you know, it's exciting and it's nerve-wracking. But let's see what the presentation is and how it goes. So that's all.
So, Mr. Chair, we could probably do that in a couple ways. I think we could probably, in preparation, we could give some kind of update on our progress and how we think we envision it. But ultimately, once we've made that hire,
Right.
That person is really going to be charged with working with the elementary and the middle school leadership team, as well as Ms. Robinson in special education, to make sure that it's built correctly. So I think, maybe a little update on the process, how we're doing in the hiring, and then once it's really started to form, absolutely, we'll either bring that person or all of us back together.
Perfect, thank you.
And Mark, it's probably worth also pointing out that in our sequencing of events, when the superintendent was hired, he was charged with coming up with a superintendent entry plan that'll be presented on time, on schedule in March. And in a perfect world, you would have had that document, and then you would have proceeded to budgetary issues. But because we have to submit the budget to the town, like every other city and town in Massachusetts, irregardless of when the superintendent came in, there'll be several things in here which are a little disjointed, but I think as we head towards March and beyond, we'll start to see how the district is shaping up, and how these positions support that general effort.
Yeah, I think we have one of the earliest town meetings in the Commonwealth, so, if the town administrator feels like he can, tweak that down the road, that'd be great. So, I'm not holding my breath on that one, though. So, we've talked a couple weeks in a row about the fact that we have a roughly $320,000 budget gap that we need to close. We've also talked that is basically two major drivers. The legislature voted to approve a 14% increase for non-consortium special education placements. And then on top of that, we have some, potential increases around the cost of doing business, fuel, heat, electricity. Those kind of costs have really skyrocketed. Anybody who owns a home, rents, has tried to do any construction or projects, they understand the cost of what's going on in the world right now. So those two major drivers have really hit us to an average possible gap of about $320,000. The other thing we've talked a lot about, that we will talk a little bit more on subsequent pages, is around the school choice number. And in order to make our current budget balance and be presentable the way it is tonight, we are leveraging the entire $1.5 million school choice intake, so to speak, to make the budget happen. That makes us nervous. Think about having a checking account and a savings account for your house or for your family. That puts us in a position to not really have the robust savings account that we'd like to have, because we threw it all into the checking account on the expenses. So in a perfect world, we would not leverage every single dime to make the budget balance in the future with that, and we'd be able to leverage that money a little differently. So that's our long-term hope. So, on top of that $320,000, there is the desire on the district to make sure that we somehow can react and be sustainable on the other side with that money too. And again, that's a projected 1.5 million. Our school choice numbers won't come in until they come in. So right now, that's our best estimate based on historical data. So as a result of that, the leadership team has spent many, many hours wrestling with meeting the needs of students and at the same time making some tough reductions. So we'll go through these one at a time, and if we have clarifying questions or conversation at the table, we can do that. District has 4 teaching clerk positions based on contract language and expectations. Those positions do have to be looked at differently during times of reduction in force. So this, in essence, eliminates 1 teacher clerk position at the high school and 1 teacher clerk at the middle school, and you can see the savings of roughly $54,000. The next one is a 0.6, the equivalent of a 0.6 high school science teacher, was in our budget this year. We didn't fill it. We covered those classes in a very creative way. Thank you, Principal Rose, for making that happen. And as a result, it's not necessarily a person. It's the equivalent of an FT, of a 0.6 FTE, which brings us down to 3 full-time science teachers at the high school in the department next year. So that's roughly $30,000, almost $31,000. The next reduction you'll see here is to go to a one librarian for the district model. So this reduces us our library department from 2.0 FTEs to 1.0. As a result, the district will have one district-wide librarian to manage 2 school libraries. Library services will be redesigned in a manner that will still allow the district to continue to educate and support our students in these areas of literature, research, and digital citizenship. Important to slow down and state that our elementary students will not lose direct library services. The model will be created to support direct library services. It is crucial at the elementary level. We say all the time, kids have to crack the code by 3rd and 4th grade. I feel like we say it younger and younger, that we want literacy as early and as often as possible for our students. So we want to make sure that all of these skills around literature and research and digital citizenship and access are being met for our young students at the elementary school. So however we build this model, we're confident that we'll be able to support the needs of our students in library and media studies with this one librarian model. The next one reduces our nursing department from 3 full-time nurses to 2 nurses. As a result, there will be 1 full-time nurse in each school. Massachusetts Department of Public Health Services unit does give us an opinion on this and talks about a ratio of 1 full-time nurse equivalent in each building with between 250 and 500 students. The elementary school's current enrollment is 302. The middle school, high school's current enrollment is 425, and those numbers will be a little smaller next year. We take the health and wellness of our students extremely seriously. We're talking about nursing, we're talking about counseling, we're talking about BCBAs, we're talking about a lot of positions that are not academic positions. So we don't want the community to think that any of these cuts reflect a lack of attention or desire to meet needs of students in certain areas. We do believe that our district size and the current needs of our students make it possible for us to make this reduction. None of these reductions tonight are easy. It's a small district. There are people by name, but we're making hard decisions to be fiscally responsible and try to move the district forward to the best of our ability. And so we are confident that we'll be able to continue to provide services as necessary in all areas for our students. We're getting a little creative with our middle school and high school substitute teacher line. So we're going to cut that number. I can't remember if that's in half or by a third, but basically by almost $24,000. We have full-time sub at each building, so we're going to try to build a new deployment model, so to speak, that will have students when we don't have teachers and we don't have sub coverage, we can have them covered uniquely and differently, particularly the middle school and the high school with our current staffing. Very difficult to find substitutes in general anyway. So we often are asking staff members to really step up and be team players, and the faculty and staff have been unbelievable all year long supporting that to make sure that we have as little loss on learning time as possible when teachers or staff members are out sick for reasons out of their control. So we'll play with that subline a little bit. We're confident that we can make that work, and it's a nice little added piece of money to the reduction. The last one is a result of some attrition and programming conversations that we had already started, just leveraging this possible resignation as a way to make it happen right now. So as a result, we won't have reading as a sub-separate class in the 6th grade moving forward. And the components of the 6th grade reading curriculum will be integrated into the English Language Arts curriculum in 6th grade, which is very common in most middle schools across the Commonwealth already. So we don't believe that that's going to have a negative impact to the literacy or the development of our students in reading and writing. And it just happens to be, it's a strange way to phrase it, but it's an opportune time to take advantage of this change. And again, it's not the district making a decision with a staff member or a position, which, whenever we can do that without impacting somebody personally, that's a much better way to handle these kind of decisions. So that adds up to about $342,000, almost $343,000 in reductions. We said the number was roughly 320 or a little higher. The reason for the overage is simply because of the $1.5 million in school choice and our nervousness, quite honestly, about whether or not that's going to be the real number or not. So this gives us a little bit of room. It also gives us a very little bit of room, but it also gives us a little bit of room in case the needs of students or anything programmatically shifts between now and the end of this school year that we have to think about for next school year. So I'll pause there because that's a lot of information to take in around reductions and changes, and open up the floor to the committee.
Do you feel that the $1.5 million
it's a historical estimate. Yeah, so I think we said this publicly. We have 21 current school choice seniors, if my number is correct, and so, minimally, we hope to fill those 21 seats. The leadership team had a meeting this morning to talk about school calendar and school choice. So at our next school committee meeting, we'll be putting those in front of the committee to discuss for your approval, so that we can get this out early, so that those numbers will become as real as possible.
So Mark, maybe one of the ways to start this discussion too is these decisions were not taken lightly, obviously. It's not what you want to do 6 months into your term as new superintendent. It's not a way to endear yourself to the staff. But the way it was done in terms of a collaborative senior administrator approach, taking in best practice and other information from within the education community, it's not like they invented it out of whole cloth. And I think this budget booklet is similar metaphorically to that effort, in the sense that this booklet didn't just come out of nowhere. We took a look around to see what best practice was out there. We found a format that had won national awards for clarity and informative purposes. And in a similar way, some of these reductions, although they're painful because we know the people, we know the faces, it's never easy to let go of anyone, and frankly, Rockport has not let go of anyone in a very, very long time, and that's not a reason to do it, but it's difficult, but it's informed by what the best practices are of schools within the area, within the nation, so there's a lot of rationale behind how the choices were made. Nevertheless, it's still really painful if you're an impacted person, and it's a heartbreaking exercise to go through. I know in my private life, having gone through this exercise many times in a non-K-12 environment, nobody takes it lightly. It's very difficult. So I just wanted to thank, first of all, the administrative staff and Mark for really facing the hard decision that we cannot have an override 1 year and then spend 3/5 of it because fuel costs and state legislators have decided to give increases to other schools outside of our control. We have to do something. Looking at some of these changes, I'll sort of state the obvious here. When I look at other school districts, these changes are in line with what many school districts have already done, so that the fact that it's being driven by these factors outside of our control, that's the main driver, but I think they're defensible really across the board outside of that. So hopefully what the committee is seeing, and hopefully what the public will see, is that we really do take seriously our primary charter of doing what is best for the student, but then beyond that, to be responsible for the resources that we've received to achieve that goal. And I think as painful as this exercise is, it has to be done.
I was wondering if you could talk more about sort of your thinking and the admin team's thinking behind some of the changes, in the sense of, the high school and the middle school, to some degree, it seems more targeted to programming and academics, whereas the elementary school more regarding social emotional with the BCBA, even the guidance, and I'd say even to a degree reclassifying the deans to the AP positions. And then you've talked a lot this year about your professional development with the restorative justice. So I'm wondering if you could kind of tie that thinking into these changes a little bit for us.
So when we talk about meeting the needs of the whole child, the world that we grew up in, the schools that we went to, were very punitive and authoritative, I guess is a nice way to put it, generally speaking, if you're of a certain age. So we know a lot more about the needs of human beings and young children and what it takes to keep them engaged in the classroom and to keep them moving forward academically. It takes social emotional safety. It takes them to feel like they have a sense of community and belonging. So we spent a lot of time in the district talking about sense of belonging. We are working with a consultant who did a professional development with our leadership team already in restorative practices, and that consultant is coming in on January 31st to kick off a 3 or 4 session professional development series for the entire faculty and staff district-wide. So meeting the needs of students socially and emotionally is the job of all of us from me on down. And we'll be all involved in that training. So it's not just the inclusion of a BCBA or a new behavioral program or the sustainability of the adjustment counselor at the elementary school, but it's really a whole district effort to meet the needs of students. I think when we talk about the difference between social emotional needs and academic needs, you have what you don't see here when we will get to the page soon that talks about grants, but the elementary school has already secured grant funding and has worked on landmark writing programming and has had some professional development done there. We anticipate having a full K-8 curriculum review and adoption process for English language arts. We don't know if that will happen between now and June or if it will happen early next year. We know it's going to happen. We're at the mercy of a grant cycle there as well. So we've, particularly coming off the MCAS presentation, we did talk about the academic needs of students across the spectrum, K-12. So I don't want people to think we're only addressing one side of the coin, quite honestly. You just won't see it all reflected in some of this work.
So you talked about how you are using grants to fill the academic aspects at the elementary school because you're focusing more on the behavioral aspects. Conversely, how are you focusing on behavioral aspects at the high school? Or has that not been a main priority? Like I don't know like what you're thinking on that is.
So the student data around behaviors and manifestations is heavier at the elementary and the middle school. We also believe that you need to build certain programs from the top down. So for example, when you look at our partnership with Project Lead the Way and you look at how we're bringing in engineering and computer science, we believe that we need to do that right now because every year we don't do it, students exit the district without those experiences. So we're building that from the top down, and then we'll look at middle school programming and elementary programming. Conversely, when we do this work, we look at the elementary first because we know what the research says around literacy, numeracy, and social emotional safety, that if we build that up in a student early, it's like scaffolding all the way up, and it builds a stronger student who's more academically engaged and more likely to connect with school for the entire K-12 experience. It doesn't mean we don't think we have some behavioral needs at the high school. It doesn't mean that we can't leverage that BCBA and what we learn about building 2 programs to assist the needs of the high school. It also doesn't mean that all students suddenly won't have behavioral needs after having a program in place. And so we do believe there'll be a trickle up impact on students in the future at the high school.
We talked about this a little bit before, and you went over some of them when you were just talking about it now. But just for the record, especially I think that there will be different things that are of more interest to the community as we move forward with reading through this. Let's talk a little bit about the plan that how is the teacher clerk work going to be covered? We talked last week about the high school teacher a little bit. The school librarian plan. I think that's going to be of interest to the people, in general. They can either see it in the notes or on TV.
So respectfully, they probably won't see it in the notes or on TV. What's probably going to happen is once that person is identified as the full K-12 librarian, similar to our behaviorist building a program, that person will be engaged with the principals, the assistant principals, maybe some team members from the literacy department, content leaders minimally to decide how we're going to build that, how we're going to staff it. We have brainstormed it. And as I've said a million times to the internal stakeholders, we are not the content professionals, right? My content degree is in one specific area, and then I have other degrees in educational leadership, et cetera. So none of us are content experts beyond our content expertise. So we're facilitators of process. So we're going to facilitate processes. We're going to lean on the professionals in the district to help us build these programs. And similar to your ask around presentations the first time, I think it would make sense again. It might be a really long August meeting, I'm not sure, but somehow we'll get that information out to make sure that particularly the parents in the community, but everybody has an understanding of what library services look like or what some of these changes look like from an impact. They're not... as Chairman Kelly said, a lot of these reductions are not out of the norm compared to other districts that we've looked at, and in many cases, very high performing and successful school districts. So we have lots of models.
So you talked about changing the structure of the school nurses, and that naturally leads to the question of what about COVID and similar things. Do you have you addressed how, if say there was another variant or something and another outbreak, how they would you be looking into maybe another healthcare professional to assist the registered nurses in the school? How would you deal with the contact tracing and the massive amount of work that goes into that if that situation were to occur?
So I guess I believe in proactive planning, but I don't believe in predictive work. I can't predict that kind of thing. We didn't predict it the first time, and I'm not sure we're going to predict it the second time. So we believe that 2 nurses is adequate medical coverage for all of our students. And if we find ourselves in a position where we suddenly don't have adequate medical coverage, there are lots of ways. Some districts hire LPNs. Some people hire part-time nurses. Some people contract services. There's a lot of different ways to get medical professionals involved in the school, and it's kind of fluid. A student can move in tomorrow who has a need for a nurse, a one-on-one nurse. That changes our staffing pattern. So right now we're confident that 2 nurses is an adequate coverage for the medical needs of our students and the size of our district.
I did want to speak to that a little bit too. I think that's probably right. When my kids were younger, there were more students, and with fewer students, you don't need as much medical professionals. And I think also maybe some of the work being done to reduce anxiety and stress among the kids will reduce the number of visits to the nurses. Hopefully, we'll see some health effects there. But I do want to give a shout out to, thank God we had the nurses who were here when we had them, because they were real heroes during COVID, and they were a great team. And all of these cuts are hard, but that one hurts too.
Thank you.
Other questions before we move on to the rest of the book, or?
I think I just wanted to kind of echo what Michael said, what Colleen said. All of these cuts are difficult. We're a small district. We put names to positions, and it can be, nobody wants to be doing this, especially our new superintendent. But I think that I speak for myself and the rest of the committee that we really trust our leadership team in the district, and we trust that they've had to make these hard decisions all to make sure that we're meeting the needs of students while kind of meeting the needs of these uncontrolled costs that we have no control over them, and they've really put a lot of time and effort into making sure that student needs are met at the same time. So thank you to the whole leadership team for that.
So as we move through, you will see on the following pages, you'll see a pretty detailed section on student enrollment, which gives you our current enrollment for 22-23, with a total of about 727 students. These numbers were in November, so clearly there's ebb and flow, a couple kids in, a couple kids out based on move-ins. So just with the caveat that check the date in the book so that you know when these numbers were real. But they haven't really fluctuated that much. We are committed to increasing the number of families that choose the Rockport Public Schools as their preferred educational opportunity for their children. That's an important statement to pause on. We believe that there's a school for every child. I believe in school choice. I believe in homeschool. I believe in private school, and I heavily believe in public education. I think every family has to make decisions that are in the best interest of their child, and there's the right school for everybody. But we are committed to finding ways to make sure that the majority of our Rockport taxpayers believe that our offerings are the preferred educational opportunity for their students. That's why the first part of this presentation is so important, that people hear that we are looking at programming, and we are looking at staffing, and we're looking to make sure we're preparing our students for a world that they don't even live in yet. Just as early as today, Principal Rose and I were in 2 or 3 meetings, and over the course of this week, I think we've been in 6 together with all of the curriculum coordinators in one-on-ones to talk about course offerings at the high school, to talk about taking a hard look at our electives, to talk about creating 2-year pathways for students so that if we offer 8 electives in a certain area, they're not undersubscribed or cut because of enrollment. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure that the whole system K to 12, but particularly ultimately when you get to the high school, that there is a desire to stay here because we are competitive and we're preparing students well. Every year we're going to do that work. So we don't know that that will equate to, increase in enrollment. The hope is it equates to a higher percentage of students staying in the district. And with that said, in an effort to best understand our trends at the end of this book, we did contract with the New England School Development Council, and you will see an enrollment projection report by this third-party organization. We wanted to make sure it wasn't, numbers coming from the community, numbers coming from the new superintendent, the past superintendent. There's no bias intended. So it's a clean report, totally data-driven, third-party generated. It's a 10-year projection. We're going to lean on those numbers heavily to make sure we're making staffing decisions and programmatic decisions for our district moving forward. The next section takes us through the school choice information. This committee is pretty well schooled on all of this, so update for the community that if they take a good look at this, they'll see that currently 25% of our student enrollment is made up of school choice. The 10-year projection is predicated on us maintaining roughly 25%, which we do believe is maintainable. There's a historical piece of information here that shows you over a 10-year period of time, students that are choicing in and choicing out. We are clearly to the positive there. We're proud of that. And the next page, we always get asked, where are they? Or where do they come from? So kudos to anybody. I don't want to even name the people. They know who they are because there were like 3 or 4 people. I will name if I have to. Cheryl Keating, Amanda Ogier, Martha to some extent. Who else? So too many people in the district to help us find this data. This should have been easier to find. Now it will be, I think, moving forward. So this is really a nice snapshot. Shows you exactly how many kids are coming in, how many kids are going out, tells you where they're coming from, where they're going to, and what numbers of students are homeschooled going out to the tech and private schools. And so this, I hope, will put real context and truth behind the conversations we have in the community around, how many people are running out of the Rockport Public Schools and how many people aren't coming here or are coming here. It's right there in front of you. And the percentages are small when it comes to who's not staying. And in some cases, they're making the right decision, right? The students at the tech, I believe that is their public option. I believe they believe that is the choice that's right for them, and that is their right. So just this is a nice page, I think, that puts a little bit of context so that the community doesn't have wide varying discussions around this data. And then we'll update this every year moving forward with subsequent budget presentations. And some really big picture future budget considerations here. As we look ahead, future budgets will really need to support consistent and systemic curriculum review and adoption. You will see in the spreadsheets, we talked about this, I think, in different forums already. You'll see certain numbers at the 3 elementary schools go down in supplies and materials and textbooks, and you'll see a $40,000 increase at central office. That is not for us to, pay for the coffee fund every Friday, but it is really to help us fund a viable 5-year teaching and learning cycle, a real curriculum review and adoption cycle that we hope to actually implement right out of the gate with a K-8 literacy look. So that's going to be a big important component of what we do in future budgeting, and continuing to balance academic, social, emotional programming that supports the specific needs of students. And ultimately, we want to focus on recruiting, hiring, and retaining high-quality staff. I'd be remiss in a budget presentation if I don't talk about the importance of the people. We are a people industry. The research is clear. The teacher or the adult in the room is the single most important variable in the success rate of a child, academically, socially, and emotionally. We have great staff members here in Rockport who are dedicated to students, who are dedicated to this community. What I have learned quickly is because of our location, it is difficult sometimes to recruit, retain, and hire professionals. I don't know if that's true in other areas out on the island, but it's certainly true in public education. So as a result, we have to make sure it's a desirable place to work, that people feel like they're coming to work to a place where they can be valued, they feel good about working here, they feel good about the work they do with our students, and ultimately that we are offering rigorous, high-performing opportunities for students. And so that's a big ask, but it's really directly tied to our budget planning in the future. And our conclusionary statement simply talks about what Chairman Kelly talked about. This budget plan will dovetail with my report of entry findings. That will ultimately support the work of the leadership team and all of the staff around developing a strategy for district improvement, which will really be a 3-year look on a school district improvement plan. That work will come from April to the end of August, with the hope of unveiling that just as school opens up for the next school year. The rest of the book is pretty self-explanatory. Student characteristics gives a lot of breakdown for who our students are. And then all of the summaries for expenses are in here, salaries and wages, breakdown of our line item expense historically. Revenues from grants on page 21, we will stop there. So there's some grants that are sort of repetitive every year from the feds. We also are fortunate every year in Rockport to chase as many competitive grants as possible coming out of DESE. So what I gave you here is a quick look at this year, and we were able to get a couple. We have one that we're currently going to hustle through and try to apply for now. So I just want the community to know that we do everything we can to get as much grant funding as possible to support the work of the school district, as well as using the appropriated budget. And then the coronavirus relief program, ESSER does come to an end at this point in time. So you could see that 22 money was received, and we go through that money according to the processes that we're allowed to use, and then that money basically falls off the book, so to speak, as we move forward. You'll see other sections around revenues for tuition, revenues from other sources such as special ed circuit breaker, school choice, out-of-district transportation and user fees. So you get a 3-year historical look there for consistency. And then the final section of the book, this is for the people who really need to see the spreadsheets and really want to see the line items, particularly the school committee. You'll take a look at our budget overview, and then each cost center, each school and each department's breakdown. And then at the end of the budget book, you will see the appendix. Once again, the final ask of a 2.5 increase, and then the appendix that has the NASDAQ report. As thorough as I think we can make it for us in our first year together. My hope is the community understands the intent here is to be as fully transparent as possible, to tell a story so that there's a story behind the numbers and you can see the justification behind not just the ask, but the actual line item expenses and the possibility of budgeting in the future. And hopefully understand that we were as fiscally responsible as possible. We did make some tough decisions. I do foresee tough decisions happening for a couple years until we get to a position where we really feel like we have a sustainable model that meets the best interest of our kids. And with that, I will take a breath.
So before we get public comment, it's not easy to put this together. And it's really not easy to do it the first time. So I think a big sort of vote of thanks to the superintendent and his team, because I think from on page 2 and on page 32, you hear us say exactly what we're asking the town for. And in between, you get all of the data, the supporting materials, the 3-year projections, the 3-year trends, where we think we'll be in 10 years. So I think it's a phenomenal and useful document, and I think it kind of reflects upon, one of the things that all of us who have grown up or moved to Rockport love about it. It has sort of a fly in amber quality, where it's been special for a very long time, it's special now, we don't want anything to change about it, but the reality is the rest of the world is constantly changing, and if we don't take a look, a constant, continuous sort of improvement look at where we are, we're going to be the victim of those changes rather than driving those changes. So I view this booklet and then the upcoming superintendent's entry report as a way to build upon a really solid base that we have at the school and continuously improve it in a way that communicates out very clearly to the public what's going on. So thank you to I don't know if the television audience can see this. I don't know if there is a television audience, but a lot of the people who worked on this report are sitting in front of us. So just as we look into the abyss is looking back into us. And thank you, Superintendent Bronco, for organizing and bringing these people together, because I think, one of the things you pointed out is the subject matter expertise needed to inform what we want to be going forward into the future and how we manage our lives currently, it really exists from, 7 to 5 up on Jordan's Lane. It's not around this table, so organizing and driving that effort and then communicating it out, I think is just really important. So I just wanted to say on behalf of the committee, thank you for making this effort. I think it's going to be the start of something wonderful and something difficult, frankly, because one of the nice things about something being a fly in amber is you don't have to deal with uncertainty or change. But the reality is, as we all know as adults, our life is nothing but change. So you really have to be able to embrace that process and see what good you can get out of it. And I think this is really a nice way to start to frame up the mechanisms around what is it that we want to be over the next 5 to 10 years, and how do we get there, and how do we have the very best possible support for the students within the school district that we've created. So with that, I guess before the school committee speaks, because the point of public input is to help inform our discussion, is there anyone in the audience who had clarifying questions for what was presented? Because it was certainly a lot. Yes.
I should know this.
Name, address, you know the drill, right?
Yeah. Are you a resident?
Sure. Sarah Wilkinson, 23 Highview Road, Board of Selectmen. I just wanted to say, I was just texting with Mitch to figure this out, but in my 16 years on the Board of Selectmen, I think, Dr. Branco, you are the 4th superintendent I have worked with. And I like to say that in terms of transparency and working with other boards, it has, over the 16 years, improved, gotten better and better each year. But to have this, like, less than 6 months out of the gate as a product that we can now take and, fully sell to the town, to the residents, frankly, to anyone, to people looking to move here, this has just, knocked it out of the park. So thank you. And obviously, thank you to everyone in this room. And I know all the work that goes into creating something like this. And I think that the value for the entire town will pay off exponentially. So thanks.
Thank you. Now, we probably want to increase the line item for batteries for microphones. I'm just thinking.
Always works in rehearsal.
Right? All right, so I don't think, last call, but I don't think we really have a lot of people in the audience to ask clarifying questions, but I will now turn to the school committee, to the voting members, to see, do you have questions or concerns with what has been presented to you?
I have comments.
Yeah, sure.
And I want to thank Dr. Branco and Michael and the A-team for the booklet as well. The context is amazing to have it around all the numbers and to provide the real rich story of what's going on in the schools. But I also think that you had to make tough choices, but I do really see clear improvements for the students in this budget. I see steps that are being taken to address problems we've been struggling with for a few years now, such as behavior exacerbated by COVID, et cetera, science improvements in the high school. There are a lot of really great improvements that I think are going to serve our students well as they head out into the world and beyond. And the fact that cuts had to be made, I think they were made very thoughtfully. I think, again, the students stayed center, that you were able to find improvements with $340,000 in cuts is just really impressive. And, difficult as they are, I think this is a really thoughtful job, and I appreciate all the work that had to go into that. So thank you.
So where do we think we are with the 14% for, I know,
Really?
I know. I mean, we must plan for it, but I
Yes.
mean, have we been notified by anybody or?
Yes. I believe Ms. Robinson's office gets notifications on a regular basis as their budgets settle, as they start to predict, and I will use her language, if she doesn't mind. If somebody said to you, and you owned a business, that we give you permission to raise your rates by 14%, who wouldn't do that? That's the frustration on our end, is that the legislature seems to and you all read the report, right? And you asked a good question a couple of weeks ago, and we had to clarify our answer, quite honestly, because in the report it talks about how over time this is a makeup, right? It's basically a cost adjustment where the 14% is coming from. So I do know that Ms. Robinson's office has been notified by some places already what the increase is going to be. I do think we should prepare for the 14%, and anything that doesn't come in that way, we just thank whoever we thank. Yeah.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit about if it doesn't come in at 14%, where that extra, the differential would go in the budget?
So when we talk about being fiscally responsible and fiscally conservative and moving the district forward, hopefully we presented a lot of evidence around moving forward. I believe we presented a lot of evidence of being fiscally conservative and responsible. The real fear is that 1.5%, that 1.5 million, every dime being used to balance. And so if Chapter 70 changes, I'm not holding my breath, but if something changes, if somehow it's not a full 14%, I don't anticipate any of these reductions being thought of differently. What I anticipate is us adding to that checkbook, to that savings account, so to speak, and really helping deal with the reality of that 1.5 being fully expended. Yeah.
And as far as advocacy and strategy for us as a school committee, looking to our legislators, are we kind of focusing on that doing that on our own is not as effective, and doing it through our committee, our MASC? And if so, I would like to see our committee, our school committee, be more involved in our district. That way, that was one of the things that sort of came out of the conference that we went to, is that they have these district meetings, and so maybe we can sort of make that commitment to be involved in those. Like, I'm happy to go to those if I can, or we can find other, we can trade off going to them, but sort of, just making sure that we are really clearly involved in that, and we sort of have an understanding of what the advocacy is. And
so I do think that there's strength in numbers, and there's strength in organizations coming together. So the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable, actually we have a meeting coming up soon for our group, and I do believe we're going to reach out to Bruce Tarr, Representative Ferrante, and a lot of the other people who are the players in the region. That doesn't preclude us from saying maybe we would like to have an individual meeting with them, in a public forum, either here or with the Board of Selectmen, or for whatever purpose we have. It doesn't preclude that, but I think minimally the strength in numbers is MASC, MASS. There are, I think, 7 superintendent roundtables across the Commonwealth. So each one of us is kind of putting that hardcore press on there. And I don't know that it's going to have any impact on the 14%. I think it's going to potentially help them justify the need for pothole money or some kind of back-end work, which I think I'm hearing. I just haven't heard it come to fruition yet, but there is a lot of behind-the-scenes work to figure out how they can help us address this need.
But I think you're right, Nicole, in that their annual visit to us, which is often to share the cherry sheet information, in the last couple of years, it's actually gotten a little bit broader in terms of conversational topics, but I think this is one where potentially we could even call them in and just voice yes, you've gotten letters about this from various associations, but you've been fairly responsive to us in the past. Can you get real with us and tell us what, if anything, is possible in terms of trying to blunt that 14%? Because I think, the other half of that is the reason the legislature allowed that to happen was, and Robinson may have an opinion on this, they felt that those schools had a justification in an increase in support, and that's wonderful because they're focused at the students. but it doesn't mean it doesn't have an adverse impact on us. So to be supportive of both the schools, we're supporting those students with special needs, and those of us who have to pay those bills would be sort of a dream combination.
What, go back to that 1.5 million for the school choice, since it seems like it's been mentioned a few times that that's kind of a point that's somewhat concerning in terms of getting that full amount.
So I think it's not about the, we're not, I don't think we're predicting that we won't get it. So let's.
So maybe before you answer,
Yeah.
I guess one of my things, is it purely about the number of school choice or about where the school choice falls within and with special education costs, or the combination of the two?
That's correct. It's a combination. So you get $5,000 per student, regular ed. Then you also get a fraction, and there's a very complicated formula that Cheryl Keating has to spend hours and hours and hours and days on, uploading all that child's information to calculate additional funds. There's also, if there's a child, a school choice child from another district, and we have determined that they need to be outplaced, we will get 100% reimbursement from the other district, including transportation. So in what we've seen in the past, the combination has been around 1.5 million. So doing that in your best estimate. Now, we've never usually had to prepare for the full amount. It's always been growing and growing and growing. We are now at that threshold, which may have come in a couple of years, but due to the fact of rising utility costs, tuition costs, transportation costs for our special ed students, amongst a few other things, but those are nominal, we are at that point a few years early. And that is why it's a nervous number. I think it's doable. And we do have our end of year sped reserve and school choice reserve that we are allowed to tap into, but we just received an override recently, and you don't want to dwindle that down to nothing. It's supposed to have some legs, and you certainly don't want to fully commit all your revenue that you're coming in and decimate your surplus.
And I think it's important to also say that we can't just talk about numbers and numbers. So when I said earlier we have 21 school choice students graduating, as June just explained, it's not as clean as 21 in, 21 out. The profile and the makeup of how those students are or aren't funded or reimbursed, it changes. And so that's the unpredictable nature. Do I think we're going to be able to get 21 school choice students next year? Absolutely.
And
or
that's,
more.
it's always
just the
unpredictable,
makeup.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
always, and it can change throughout the course of the year as well, right? Yeah.
Yes, not even year to year, but even month to month. Most definitely.
And then I had another question about that. The total revenue, like I'm looking at page 32, the total revenue is 2.7 million. So from that 2.7, about half of that is that school choice amount of the 1.5 that you're speaking of, if I'm reading it correctly. So if about half is the school choice revenue, the remaining part of the revenue are those numbers fairly confident? Like are those numbers the numbers that will be, or will those numbers also or could possibly fluctuate as well? The rest of the revenue.
Yes, they're a little more concrete. I think probably a better look is on page 24. So I would refer you to page 24 on the offsets. So we have our town contribution that we're asking for a 2.5 increase, which is the 13.9 number. The 1.5 school choice, we've already identified a couple of children that we know are 100% reimbursable. That's the line above, so that is guaranteed. Circuit breaker, that is a hard number. Yeah. What happens is this year right now, the number is being calculated. However, we are receiving last year's calculation this year. We are required to spend it by next year. So what we received last year, that is the number, and it's a hard budget. So that's a hard number that we are required to spend, that 820.
Right.
The 250, again, is the federal grants of that, not just the total grant, the grant portion that you're allowed to use for salaries. So that has just been a trend. They're pretty consistent. It fluctuates a little bit. And it's a number that we're comfortable with. So if the awards go down a little lower, please correct me if I'm wrong, we still are comfortable with that number. It would be great if we get more. It doesn't mean that we are, but we're very comfortable. The user fees are pretty set and that we're comfortable with over the years, and it seems to be trending well. Just a reminder what we've had in the past on discussion with athletics. You don't want to count for every dollar that you bring in user fees because our budget has no room for success, no room for unanticipated replacements of equipment, additional transportation costs, or if you needed freshman or intramural. So you don't want to commit 100% of your user fee collection towards the general budget. You do need a little bit left over for success of our athletes, which luckily we have needed.
And as the chair has said in the letter, and I think in many meetings previously, budgeting is your best estimate, right? This is our best estimate. Much of this is real solid hard numbers, and some of it is predicated on historical data and what we know is predicted to come. And again, I'm confident that these numbers are viable at this point.
Yes, I could do that too. So any other questions before we potentially move to a vote? All right, seeing none from the voting members. Well, we'll get to those. Yep,
okay.
we'll get to those, but I thought since we've had the discussion, we've had the public input. Do I have a motion to approve the amount of $13,952,850.50 to stand as the fiscal year 24 school budget?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, that's great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was something. We appreciate the artwork. It's really great artwork. I was kind of blown away by the pieces that were chosen. Oh,
You might not know either.
nepotism. Okay, so our next item of business is the middle school drama field trip.
So look,
That'd be the Newsies.
yes, so you will see in your drive a proposal from Mr. McCarthy to take the middle school program. And the real reason we're before you is it's an out-of-state trip. I believe it's on the weekend, if I'm reading this correctly, right? So it's a weekend trip for our students and 3 chaperones to go see Newsies up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And because it's an over-the-border type trip, we'll seek your approval tonight.
Right, and it's got the appropriate number of chaperones. So any questions or concerns about that? Do you have a motion to approve the May 28th Newsies field trip for the middle school as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that would move us to
I
finance.
think we've done a lot of that tonight.
Yeah, okay, June,
I'm done.
you've had enough of a speaking role? Is there any walk-on school committee discussion? No, okay. Oh, yes.
I just wanted to see what the best way was. I know we briefly talked at the last meeting. The regional social worker for our region contacted me through Mary Beth Murphy, who's our liaison with the Board of Health, and wanted to get onto one of our agendas in the next month or two. So is that something?
Absolutely, yeah. If you
Talk
want to just
to
reach out to Amanda.
Reach out to Amanda,
Yeah,
okay.
Amanda can get that on our schedule.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. I don't believe there's a need for executive session. All right, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.